Too hot for TV.
Welcome back to Doctor Who Too Hot for TV. We are the podcast that looks at all things Doctor Who Extended Universe. And today, as part of the Advent calendar this Christmas, I'm joined by Gary Russell. Gary, how are you?
I'm good. I've never been inside an Advent calendar. I'm very, very excited. I think that someone's going to open a little door and they're going to expect a lovely bit of sort of bounty or Cadbury's caramel. And instead, they've just got a loon beaming at them from Cardiff with a Doctor Who annual in his hand.
Has there ever been a Doctor Who Advent calendar?
Not that I'm aware of. I'm sure there probably have been unofficial ones, but I don't think any of the people that you'd expect those people that did Easter eggs and things all those years ago. An Advent calendar would have been an obvious thing to do.
Yeah.
No. Go ahead and sort it out, Dylan. Go and make them happen.
I will. And I kind of think, especially now that we have all these extravagant Advent calendars with, like, you can get little toys in them and stuff, Doctor Who would be ripe for that sort of thing. There's loads of little Doctor Who toys you could hide away in an Advent calendar.
And then kids could swallow them and choke to death.
Exactly.
And the Daily Mail would go, ha, Doctor Who is killing our children.
Indeed. But we're not here to talk about Advent calendars. We're here to talk about a very specific Doctor Who annual story, The World of Ice.
The World of Ice, yes.
From the Doctor Who annual 1969, which was released in September 68. But before we get started on that, I just want to know, are you an annual person? Did you get them as a kid? Do you buy them now?
Yes. Yes is the answer to all of those. I have a complete collection. The story of why I've chosen this story from this particular annual is why and how I got into how I discovered annuals. I didn't get them as a kid until the first one I got myself as a Christmas present from my nan was the Power of the Planet the Daleks one, the Pertwee one, because I was excited. Because prior to that, had that thing, I was a little kid and I thought I knew everything about Doctor Who, and I therefore thought I owned everything about Doctor Who. So one day, and this would have been around the time that Day of the Daleks was on TV, and Day of the Daleks was this was leading up to episode 1. And this was a big thing at school. The Daleks were back. We're of an age where we remembered certainly the repeat of Evil of the Daleks. Some of us remembered the original. And there had been a picture in Radio Times of John Pertwee crouching behind a slab of stone or something with some weeds, and a picture of a Dalek. And that Dalek against his red background was from Evil of the Daleks. It was one of the black helmeted ones, which I knew. And I was proudly going around school going, oh, that's from Evil of the Daleks. That was the last time they're on television. I also, being an arrogant twat, also said, that's actually the Emperor Dalek. He's got the black head. That's the Emperor. And people at school are going, I'm pretty certain that isn't the Emperor Dalek. Yeah, no, I was saying that's definitely the Emperor Dalek. And he's obviously going to be in this Day of the Dalek story. Oh, that's exciting. And my friend at school, Stephen Young, then brought in, this would be probably the Thursday or Friday before Day of the Daleks went out, he brought in this 1968 Doctor Who annual with its fantastic front cover with the Cyberman bursting through the door of the TARDIS, and on the back cover is a fantastic painting of the Cyber Leader from Tomb, obviously artistically endowed. And I was gobsmacked. I was just like, wow, what is this amazing book? And he didn't get it back for quite a long time. And I devoured this Troughton Doctor Who annual in the midst of all this Pertwee Dalek fever. Suddenly discovering that Doctor Who annuals existed, and therefore, how could I get this particular annual? And, you don't realize when you're sort of 9 years old that a Doctor Who annual from 1968 is not going to be on sale in WH Smith's tomorrow. Nevertheless, my poor father had to go to WH Smith's and try and find it. He couldn't. And I suppose that must be the year there wasn't an annual, because he didn't come back with any annual at all. I mean, most people would go, well, I can't find this one he wants, but oh, look, here's another Doctor Who annual.
Yeah.
But there were no Doctor Who annuals. So I was very, very upset. And Stephen Young had a very hard job getting this annual back out of my hands. And I just fell in love with every single story. And I think it was the pictures inside that really did it for me. The artwork is phenomenal. Every single story in there has fantastic bits of artwork. And I fell in love with World of Ice because it has this brilliant I love the cogwens in it. They are fantastic. These 4-armed robots bashing on the side of the TARDIS. That's a great bit of artwork. But the picture of the robot Doctor and Jamie smashing into the ground and falling apart, and cogs and sparks and everything going everywhere just fired my imagination no end. Weirdly, again, in that way that you are when you're a kid, and you sort of, in your head, stories feed into each other. And by the time the novelization of Doctor Who and the Abominable Snowmen came out, I was quite perturbed to discover that a sequence where Victoria is attacked by robotic Jamie and the Doctor and falls on the ground and explodes never happened. And it was many years later I thought, oh, I have put those two stories together because they didn't own this bloody annual. Enough time had passed between that and the novelization coming out that somehow I'd convinced myself that this was actually a story set, or was in fact part of the Abominable Snowmen. Probably not helped by the fact there's Abominable Snowmen pictures slapped all over this annual on the sort of fly leaves and on the back cover and everything. And I'd sort of confiltrated these two things into one story. And so World of Ice has always had this very sort of emotional thing for me of fantastic artwork, a quite good story actually for Victoria. The Doctor and Jamie are basically not in this story.
Yeah.
It is a solo Victoria story. And then this insane idea that somehow I'd convinced myself this was actually, I'd seen this on TV as part of the Yeti story, which is obviously just the first sign of madness. And at the age of 9 or 10 years old, I probably should have been locked away somewhere.
So you're quite a rarity in that I have done a few of these. Don't look so shocked. And
I suddenly feel I should be in an antique shop behind glass.
No, most people have said, yeah, just pick one. But when I came to you, I had no idea whether you knew anything about annuals or not. But you were very specific that this is the one that was one of like two we were going to do.
This, even though I say it wasn't my first one actually ended up being the Planet of the Daleks one. This emotionally, for me, is where it all began. This is where I discovered that annuals existed. And as a result, because of the stories and the artwork, it has always had this very emotional part of my Doctor Who makeup. So when people say, what's your favourite annual? That one. Troughton, Sidemen bursting through the door, holding Jamie back, totally ripped off from a Lost in Space comic. Didn't know that at the time. But, if Chris Achilles can rip off Jack Kirby for the Three Doctors cover, then why can't Howard rip off Gold Key for the Doctor Who annual cover? And just hours and hours and hours of not letting my friend Stephen have his annual back as I read and reread. And there's a lovely comic strip in there, which I've always thought is one of the most powerful, emotionally most powerful Doctor Who comic strips, which I'm sure they just thought was a bit of fun, about this planet they go to, which is inside sort of microverse. And inside these droplets on trees, each teardrop contains a living person because their worlds have been destroyed by mankind firing off uranium and creating atomic bombs. And the Doctor says at the end, I must go back to Earth and stop them creating atomic bombs. And I remember thinking, yes, atomic bombs are clearly a bad thing. And little things like that, they stick in your head. And they, of course, looking back at all of this now with a sort of 2025 head on, you look at this annual and now, Jesus, they really were desperate because it is very, very obvious. The comic strip, the two strips in particular, but also most of the stories were clearly written for Ben and Polly. They're not written for Victoria. And they were obviously all holdovers from about 2 years earlier. And all they've done is they've changed the names. And in one case, they've forgotten to change the name. And Victoria's called Polly in the middle of a story for no really good reason. But Jamie calls the Doctor Doc all the time. And Troughton still talks like William Hartnell.
Yeah.
It's all my boy this. And yes, he must go and do this sort of thing, my boy. Come along. But it didn't matter. The annuals were this kind of little world of their own where things like that you expect it in the annuals. I remember when the 70s annuals came out, the Tom Baker ones, with all that fantastic artwork by Paul, and they were weird, and Tom Baker was wearing white suits, and Harry had a moustache, and all of the... But you expect... That's what the Doctor Who annuals were about by that point. You weren't looking at them going, this is going to be a faithful representation of what's on TV. This is going to be what the hell have world distributors come up with this Christmas that can be as far removed from what's on television at the moment as it could possibly be. And that's why I love the annuals, and I still do. I still think that my little collection downstairs of every Doctor Who annual is something I'm immensely proud of. And they're not in pristine nick. They're all still in the nick they were in when I bought them.
Amazing.
When I bought them, sorry, because I've had them for 40 odd years. They have fallen apart and spines of it. And people have said to me, "Oh, go on eBay and replace them and get pristine ones for 300 quid." And I'm like, "No, these are my ones from when I was a child."
Yeah.
Even the ones I've subsequently rebought, everything I rebought in the 80s. Didn't rebuy, sorry. When I filled in the gaps, so everything prior to the Planet of the Daleks one, I had to go out and buy in the 80s. At a point where we thought 30 quid for a Doctor Manual was extortionate.
Yeah.
But I bought all the ones I was missing, including a copy of this copy here. Oh, it's so pretty. That, listeners, was me holding up a copy of that annual. And I'm just immensely proud of them. And I would never replace them with newer, pristine copies for anything, because there's an emotional attachment to them.
Absolutely. So this particular story, World of Ice.
World of Ice.
It's a Victoria-centric story.
Yep.
Doctor Who and Jamie have buggered off and left her in the TARDIS. They've gone to explore.
Because she's a girl.
Because she's a girl. They've gone to explore. They come back. They're acting a bit funny. Turns out they're robots. She meets the alien inhabitants of the world who have been overtaken by the Cogwins, is it?
Cogwins. Cogwins are the metal men. And the Morogs, that's right. They're the indigenous, and they're small. We don't actually have any pictures of them, but they're small. They're described as being shorter than her. And then there's these weird lizard creatures. You're not quite sure what they're about, but Victoria manages to defeat them by conveniently having in her pocket some perfume, which she throws in its eye. Which again, actually, in my head, is like, hey, I bet this was originally Polly, and they were like, "Oh, cocktail Polly. Oh, she always carries things she can throw at stuff." It works for me, and I think it's because I have a thing. I love alternate universe stories. I like robot duplicate stories, and therefore this had a robot duplicate of the Doctor and Jamie. So immediately I'm interested in that. I like that sort of thing. Will Victoria be able to spot that they're not really them? Well, yes, because for no readily apparent reason, having tried to convince her that they're the real Doctor and Jamie, and Victoria's quite smart and goes, "You're absolutely not." They then open their shirts to reveal that they're robots. I'm sure there's a very valid reason for them doing that if they're trying to persuade her that they're not robots, but that's what they do. And then they fall over and turn into springs and cogs.
And spoilers for the reader, but we know they're robots from the start because the picture before any text to start is
showing them as robots.
Yeah.
That famous shot of them pulling their chests open and revealing robots, yes. And the Cogwins, I just think that you look at the design of the Cogwins in that artwork, they're beautiful. They're so 60s in a robot kind of way, with their forearms and their funny little mushroom heads. And for anyone who can't see me, I just actually demonstrated a mushroom head with my hands there, because, that's what you do when you talk about mushroom heads. It's just an inventiveness. And that's the great thing about annuals from all eras of Doctor Who, is they have an inventiveness about them for approximately one of these stories, probably 1,500 word stories, maybe 2,000 word stories. And every single one of them is inventive. Every single one of them. They don't always succeed, but they are inventive. They're never bland. They're never boring.
Mm-hmm. So Victoria comes up with a way to liberate the Morogs, which is basically the Trojan horse thing.
Yep.
They go in the TARDIS, they're taken into the base, and they start a revolution. And Victoria rescues the Doctor and Jamie, which is a turn up for the books. And they immediately leave without... The Doctor's got no interest in getting involved.
It's lovely, isn't it? Because you can tell that they're running out at the end of the story here. Because, yes, they've done the Trojan horse thing. The Cogwins have brought it in. She opens it up. The Morogs go out with their laser guns, and they then destroy the robots, all of which happens off screen.
Yeah.
We then follow Victoria. While the actual interesting stuff is happening off screen, Victoria has started a revolution but can't be bothered to see it through. She then rescues the Doctor and Jamie. There is a lovely sort of twist in the tale. But then you get that awful thing that they do in the annuals when they're running out. They're going, "Oh, God, we've only got 2 paragraphs left. How can we end the story?" The Doctor says, "I'm a scientist, and I think I know how to free us from the prison. Victoria, press that button, turn that lever. I've been studying that," despite the fact it's obviously been sitting there untouched for the last day. And she does as she's told, and they're completely saved. And they get back in the TARDIS and they go. And there's this lovely last line where Jamie says, "Oh, I think we'll never know what the end result was." And Victoria looks at the screen and somebody comes out and waves at her. And she goes, no, they're all fine. They're all safe. And I like to think the TARDIS disappears and then the waving man falls down dead and all the cockroaches come out and brain all the people because they're smarter than that. It's deliciously simplistic and like a really bad episode of Star Trek Next Generation. 10 minutes before the end, oh shit, we've got to wrap this plot up. But that's the joy of the annuals. Yeah. They never outstay their welcome.
Absolutely. It's impossible to get bored with them.
Absolutely.
Because you can just get through them in 15 minutes and you're like, yeah, fantastic.
And if you are bored, you just go and look at the pretty pictures. There's another book, I can't remember which story it is in the annual, but it's, again, one of those visceral memories in me that always makes me very, very passionate about this annual is these aliens who are completely white, look like they're wearing suits with chicken things on their heads, and they keep getting eaten by big green monsters. And Death to Muffle has this fantastic piece of artwork of the Doctor falling through a man trap, and then you meet Muffle and he's got funny antennas on his head, and everything is so 60s and so pulpy. And Doctor Who was 60s and was pulpy in a way, but the annuals took everything to a new limit. They were unhindered by budget and only hindered by writers' imaginations and artists' imaginations. And as we say, across the 60 years of annuals, the artwork has gone from the very accurate to the Paul Compton mid-70s. What was he smoking when he drew that picture of Tom Baker? And they're all beautiful because of it. I love the annuals. I think they have this fantastic little niche corner of the Doctor Who history, all of their own.
Agreed. I'm enjoying doing this dive, jumping into all the different eras and just seeing what the writers were up to that September, essentially, as they, I'm sure, had to knock them out very quickly in a day or two.
I mean, this whole thing smacks of it was written in about 4.5 days.
Yeah.
Some of the artwork looks like it was drawn in about 4.5 minutes, but that's the joy of them. I love it.
What about the prose style then? What do we think of that?
Well, it's for kids. It's not trying to even be for grown-up kids. Everything is very simplistic and aimed at probably 8, 9, 10-year-olds. And I think that because that's obviously when I discovered it and I had no problem reading it at all. And because C also is a little bit simplistic. So yeah, it's sort of 8, 9-year-olds it's aimed at. And I don't think there's, bless them, there isn't really a writing style to it. No. Other than it's got to be simple and straightforward and have words that don't have 18,000 syllables in it. And no silly alien spellings of names with apostrophes and question marks dotted all the way through them. So it's simple to read for kids. The idea being, I imagine, that you can imagine the writers being told by the editors, imagine that a kid is going to be read this one story a night by their parents over Christmas.
That makes sense.
And that's what I think it works. It's a good bedtime story. It's the right length for a bedtime story.
So I noticed this story is maybe the 5th or 6th in the annual. And I think this is the first one that explains what TARDIS stands for. I don't quite know why they've done it there.
I imagine there's just an assumption that if you're buying a Doctor Who annual, you probably get the general gist of it. The fact that everyone's called Doctor Who. And yes, that's right. There's lovely. Oh, God, there's a description in there of the TARDIS contains laboratories and sleeping quarters. And it is this thing that the annuals were very obsessed in the 60s, which again had disappeared by Pertwee because Pertwee was much more avuncular and a bigger character. The Doctor wasn't really an explorer. And of course, we didn't have the word Time Lord anywhere. He was a scientist. So he is frequently referred to as a scientist. Oh, look, said the scientist. Oh, Jamie, go and do that, said the scientist. Doctor Who is always portrayed as a scientist. And it's the same with sort of Skyray Lolly, the story on the back of all of those. And that's a very 60s thing that intelligent people who are professors and doctors with a small d are therefore always your heroes. It is all about being told what to do and how to solve things by intelligent, educated people. Very, very white middle class British nonsense. But that's the 60s and that's what it's all about. And then they just sort of wrap Doctor Who around that.
Yeah. There's also a lovely line which says, the stench of ray guns was everywhere.
Yes. And again, that's interesting. That's a very Christmassy kind of thing. Because Christmas is the time of year as a kid where smell plays such an important part in the nostalgia of Christmas because there's food and there's everything around you is about smell. And so to write about smell in a story, and then how many kids know what a laser gun would smell like, but somehow you can imagine what it would smell like because of the use of the word stench.
Yeah, I've never given any thought to a ray gun smelling of anything.
But now you will.
Yeah, I think it's quite metallic. That's what I'm going for.
That's what I was thinking. It smells like batteries.
Yeah, perfect. Makes sense. Anything else you want to say on this story?
No, no, because I think I've probably bored everyone's senses with it. It's just, it's a jewel in a whole annual of precious stones. There's nothing bad in this annual at all. And this story, for me, emotionally, is the one that's all. Is it the best? I think Celestial Chill Room's probably a better story. I think as I say, the comic strip with the atomic people trapped in teardrops is probably a better story. I've even got a page of the original artwork of that downstairs hanging on my wall. But this is the story that nostalgically triggers this annual for me because there's the backstory to it and that little mad thought that actually this took place inside the Abominable Snowman and I'd seen it on TV.
Amazing. Well, I mean, it's great to have someone who's got an emotional connection with these stories.
What you mean is it's great to have someone who's really, really, really old and was there when it
No, because, I mean, it's like everybody's got a connection to Doctor Who annuals some way, shape or form, but a lot of people just don't remember them.
Yep.
They're a bit more disposable to other people, I think. So,
well, also, I think there's a snobbishness these days, particularly about the recent annuals. I mean, actually, the last couple of the Jodie annuals in particular were really good Doctor Who annuals. They're still far too short, but they've gone to really good town on making those annuals good. I think they're all done by Paul Lang these days, and I think he does a fantastic job on them. But there's a sort of snobby, the annuals aren't as good as they were. No, every annual, every era of annuals just reflects what Doctor Who merchandise was doing at the time.
Yeah.
I think at the moment we're going through quite a good era of annuals. I think, we had maybe it was less good during the Tennant and Matt Smith runs. They were a little bit thin and flimsy. Which is why I know DWM then did their little storybook ones, which was a fantastic idea. But I think the modern annuals are really picking up again and great. And then, of course, there's this whole subculture out there of people doing fan annuals to fill in the gaps where there weren't annuals or to do annuals about the Master or the Zygons and things like that. And they are great fun because they've captured that spirit and that essence of those 60s and early 70s albums so beautifully.
Yeah. It's amazing. And I mean, for me, I was a kid of the late 80s, early 90s. So for me, it was about the yearbooks, the DWM yearbooks.
Yeah, because you didn't have annuals. And we weren't allowed, when I was doing the yearbooks, we weren't allowed to call them annuals.
Right.
BBC wouldn't let us. Even though World didn't have the license at that point, they were saying, no, you can't call them annuals. And actually, I think everyone was quite relieved we called them yearbooks, not annuals, because those last couple that they'd done, maybe the latter Davison and the Colin Baker ones, weren't the greatest annuals that World had ever put out. So there's a sort of feeling a bit tarnished. So by calling them yearbooks, it felt like we were doing something new and exciting in that annual slot. But the ones I produced, I very much went for the let's do fiction, let's do a comic strip, let's have a couple of quizzes, let's try and recreate the annuals that I remembered from the 60s and 70s.
Well, you did an amazing job because they were my Doctor Who annual in the
Hooray!
90s. Excellent. Well, look, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been great to talk
pleasure, Dylan.
About the Second Doctor's outing in annuals.
Second Doctor Who.
The Second Doctor Who, indeed.
Second Doctor Who.
But we'll be back tomorrow with another dip into a different annual from a different era with a different guest. But until then, I've been Dylan.
I'm Gary Russell, and happy Christmas, everyone.
Happy Christmas.
Doctor Who. Too hot for TV.
Incidentally, a happy Christmas to all of you at home.